If you're a feminist, you might want to just block your ears because you're about to hear some things you probably won't like. In Australia right now, there's a lot of talk and commentary surrounding the rape and murder of a 22-year-old woman from Melbourne. Unsurprisingly, a lot of the commentary that has come out surrounding this topic has come from politicians and writers and feminists and basically anybody with a platform, and their solution to this problem is teaching men to be less violent. Yeah, I literally can't see all the holes in this idea.
And the best way to prevent this crime and keep all women safe isn't by changing the behaviour of women, but by changing the behaviour of men. This might upset some people, but honestly, parents, instead of telling our girls not to walk through parks, maybe we should be telling our boys not to rape them.
Since last week, a lot of politicians and feminists and writers have asked that we defer self-responsibility and self-defense into the hands of men, which is super ironic. These are the same people that are calling for men to change their behavior in order to keep women safe. And it just seems really backwards to me. So basically, what we're saying is that when women are in public, they shouldn't have to take all of these precautions for their safety because men should know not to rape. So what we're saying is that we're going to teach men not to be violent and not to rape and murder so that women, don't have to take all these extra measures to be safe. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that makes sense to someone, but what happens when most men already know not to rape and that, offenders are probably never going to learn that? Then what? Well, we'll just teach them not to rape as well. Okay, cool. 2 questions. What happens when that fails? And also what happens when you have a female offender? It's stupid. This whole argument is stupid. I don't know about you, but I would like the personal responsibility to deal with my own safety. I'm really not interested in putting that onus on men or on anyone else for that matter, because my safety is my responsibility and I would like the right to look after it. I don't want to put any accountability on anybody else because realistically, my life is mine and I don't really want to put that in the hands of anybody else or in the hands of the state. Sure, we can teach men not to rape, or alternatively, I don't know, maybe we can give people the right to self-defense. When a woman comes up against a man, unless they're on the ends of the spectrum and are freakishly strong, the average woman against the average man is not going to be as strong as him. And people hate it. People hate when you point this out. Women hate when you point this out. But it's something I think that's very integral to this conversation. If we're not as strong as men and we can't naturally defend ourselves, why can't we have weapons that help us do that? On a serious note, if people in this country cared even a little bit about helping women defend themselves, well, they'd probably let us carry pepper spray. At least. I want to know why it is that my safety has to be compromised because our laws make no sense. We know that in the United States, up to 2 million crimes are prevented annually because people have access to firearms. In a lot of ways, I wish that we were able to have firearms in this country, but I know that a lot of the population is not ready for that conversation. But in the very least, why don't we have access to non-lethal defensive weapons? That brings me to the second part of all of this, which Pink Wig so nicely introduced for you. And that is that men need to be taught not to rape. All men, just by the way, not offenders, but all men. Men need to learn not to rape and murder people. Do you understand? That's the argument. What? I've said it before, but Scotty, beam me up! I'm gonna lay this out because I don't feel like anybody has taken it through to its natural conclusion, but let me just do that for you right now. So in the event that we do in some alternate universe teach men actively not to rape and murder women, the only people realistically that are probably going to take that on board are the ones that aren't actually a risk anyway. Which means that the people that don't listen and that don't take that on board are the ones that are probably going to offend anyway. Let's remember that people are taught from birth that murder is wrong, and yet somehow we have scores of murderers and murders that happen every single year. So really, how is this any different? Even in schools, we teach people not to do drugs and not to drink alcohol, not to drink and drive because it's bad for you, and yet scores of people yearly do drugs, drink alcohol, and drink and drive. And I think more than this, I get really tired of the insinuation that this is a male versus female thing, because it's not. And if we really want to talk about this, when a man dies, it's a Tuesday. When a woman dies, it makes headlines. In the last month alone, we completely glossed over the fact that a woman murdered her boyfriend by burning down his apartment. We also glossed over the fact that it was Men's Health Week, which conveniently didn't really seem to pop up anywhere in the news. Because honestly, and whether people are willing to admit it or not, we don't place the same emphasis on men's lives that we do on women's. There are scores of female-only initiatives in Australia. We even have a minister for women and conveniently no minister for men. And all the time, it just seems to me that women have all these special avenues of preferential treatment that men simply don't have. In saying that, that same minister for women wrote a particularly asinine article about how women don't want to be raped and murdered and are fearful all the time. Oh my God, what? Here's the thing, and apparently, contrary to popular belief, men don't want to be raped and murdered either. In fact, men have the same fears that women do, because you know what? Men are not some weird alternate species off in some alternate universe. They actually have much of the same concerns that women do. Men have the same fear walking alone at night. Men have the same fear opening up their car in an empty parking lot. And why wouldn't they? Violent opportunists are going to be violent no matter the target. The only difference is it's much harder to rape a man than it is a woman. And like I said before, that is one of the most unfortunate and crappy parts of being a girl. But let's remember that when it comes to violent crime, men are targeted much more than women anyway. And yes, I'll caveat this by saying I do know that it is men who are the biggest perpetrators of crime in the country. I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying that men are targeted more than women. Part of the reason that you don't hear about any of this is because men just don't have a platform to express their fear and concerns. And when they do express their fear and concerns, we call them names, we call them a wuss, and we shame them. In the same vein, if men report a rape or something that's happened at the hands of a woman, there's a bigger likelihood of them being denied and them being laughed at than taken seriously. So I don't get it. Feminists, you don't get to have your cake and eat it too. Although we do know how much you guys like cake. Yeah, that was a fat joke. It was. You guys don't get to sit on your high horse and be the victim while simultaneously pretending that men don't get victimized too. Like I said before, as unfortunate as it is, women are the biologically weaker sex. And like I said, people don't like hearing it, and I know that that term is just gonna make people really mad, but it's the truth. And it's unfortunate that we are more easy to subdue and rape and hurt than a male counterpart, for instance. This brings me around to my third point, which is that men are the sole perpetrators of crime and that sexual assault statistics in Australia are super sky high. For the 5th consecutive year, female offenders have increased by 2%, while male offenders have declined. I will caveat that by saying that male offenders are still 2/3 of all offenders. When we also look at sexual assault statistics in the country, we can see that for the 7th consecutive year, it has risen. And in 2016, the number of sexual assault victims was just over 23,000. When you compare that to our population size, we can see that sexual assault victims in this country account for less than 0.1% of the total population. In saying that, we also know that about 15 to 35% of that total amount of victims are male victims. When it comes to sexual assault, we know that a lot of people do not report, and therefore it's very, very hard to know specifically what the actual numbers actually are. But I guess the thing is that when we ask ourselves how many women are sexually assaulted annually, we also have to ask ourselves how many men are sexually assaulted annually. And in doing so, it's really important to remember that we just don't look at male sexual assault in the same way that we look at female sexual assault. When I say that, I mean that men are considerably less likely to report sexual assault. They also don't feel like in a lot of instances, what has happened to them can count as sexual assault or a violent crime, particularly when it's perpetrated by women, and therefore their likelihood of coming forward is super limited. We also, as a society, do not view the things that happen to men in the same way that we view the things that happen to women. And that's really part of the problem in the way that we conceptualize the way that we treat men. So for instance, a girl might try to kiss a guy, he might say no, she might keep trying, and haha, it's super cute. On the other hand, if a guy tries to kiss a girl and then keeps trying to kiss her, we get to the point where other people step in and they say, back off, buddy. And the argument that comes back to this is that, well, he's a guy, he can push her off, he's bigger than her, he can deal with the situation. Why is that the excuse? The thing is that, regardless if he's big enough to push a woman off of him, she shouldn't be doing it in the first place if he said no. So my question is, why do we hold women to different standards than to men? It makes no sense. As far as I'm concerned, all of this begins and ends with respect and not creating victim groups and enemy groups. The thing is that men are on our side, and realistically, we should be on their side as well. I think what I'm trying to get at is that we all need to hold hands and sing Kumbaya and be a united front against all the sickos and weirdos in the world. Which brings me to my last point, which a lot of people, if you follow me on Facebook, you'll know that I've already said this, I'm going to repeat it. If politicians actually cared about protecting citizens, and I'm going to say citizens because this isn't about women, it's about people experiencing crime. If the politicians cared about that, they would start legislating and making changes that protect us, and not in such a way that takes away our freedoms. I'm talking about not letting violent offenders out on bail, not letting violent offenders out on parole, not giving people really, really, really short prison terms, things like that. And last but certainly not least, anybody who says things to me like, Sydney, you don't know what you're talking about because you have never experienced sexual assault or anything of that nature, let me just tell you that I have firsthand experience. Bringing this back around to something a little bit more positive, like I said before, I feel like it's imperative that women and men actually embrace each other's strengths and weaknesses and work together. As always, if you like the video, hit subscribe. If you have something to say or you have a comment to make, feel free to leave one, just don't be rude about it. I try to upload on Wednesday/Thursday, although that might be changing because I'm disorganized. And I'll see you guys next time.